Hey, my friends, let's talk about classic or vintage, or sometimes referred to as surplus military gear. And I'm going to use this in the context of gear that preppers continue to use. Some of this stuff goes back to even World War II, but a lot of it comes from the Vietnam conflict or conflicts that came after that. And a lot of this stuff is going to have some age to it. But there definitely is going to be some what you would consider modern classics mixed in here. And I'll kind of try to highlight that as I go. But in this podcast, I just wanted to kind of clarify that there's really quite a few things to pick from. It is quite amazing how many things that preppers typically use that come from surplus stores, flea markets, hand-me-downs from people that have been into the military, be it a friend or a family member. So it's quite shocking, at least for me. And I looked around in my own house and I found a ton of stuff that is military surplus. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that I have this much stuff. But I'm not alone. And so I thought maybe if I compile a list of the top things that people typically use to help them become more prepared in life, or give them more capability, that this may be helpful for you too, especially if you're looking for one of these types of items and you don't want to, spend top dollar, and maybe you don't even need a new item. You just need something that's going to work for you, and you don't mind if it has a little wear and tear on it, just as long as it works. So you may want to consider military surplus. So anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. Some of these things are just real classics in itself. I mean, by the very definition. For example, the first thing on the list is the K-Bar USMC fighting knife with the stacked leather washer handle and the leather sheath. It's a beautiful knife. It's what you think when you think of military classic blades. At least I do. And probably the second most popular for me, at least growing up, was the Ontario Air Force survival knife. That one also had the stacked leather washer handle and the leather sheath. It's not the most beautiful knife, but it does have that look. It has that look of military. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into more of what you would consider more generic stuff, or not as fun, at least in my opinion. That's going to be some of the packs, in particular the Alice packs. And I do believe they came in two different sizes, at least for most of the branches of the military. And the Alice packs, they're popular even today. Let's just be honest. They're affordable. If you have a surplus store nearby, you can typically get them in really good condition for around $40. I wouldn't probably pay no more than $60, but typically between $30 to $40 you can get them. And it really is a bargain. I mean, they are really tough. They're made with some good material. The next item I have here is the load-bearing web gear, or various types of vest systems. I have a lot of those. Mine come from the Vietnam era, and so they definitely have some age to them. But they're fully functional, though, and I love that camo. I love that odor camo, that jungle camo. You just don't see it very much anymore. And the next item would be the military metal canteens. Now in the modern day, they have metal canteens too, but they've gone a lot to the plastic or polymer style. So I like the old style, the old heavy stainless metal canteens and the mess kits. The next is the military surplus clothing. I love their pants and a lot of the jackets, and in particular the jungle boots. This is the old style. This is like the old Vietnam era jungle boots. When I was growing up, believe it or not, there was like so much surplus of that still floating around that you could still get new jungle boots. They still sold some lightly used ones as well, but you could still get, I mean, in a lot of the surplus stores almost exclusively just had new jungle boots. And when I was growing up, they were going for like averaging $20. I remember that pretty specifically, about $20, and they had like olive drab and black. I think that was the main two colors. And I remember trying them on, and they came way up my leg, and they were really stiff. I'm sure you have to just break them in, but even in the modern day, they have different kinds of jungle boots, obviously, than they did back then. But you can still go to military surplus stores and get very lightly used boots um, for a song and a dance. The next would be the mil-spec wool socks and gloves and hats, just a lot of the wool products. And the military, at least in my experience, I have a lot of the wool products that have been issued to soldiers. They typically are 100%. Like, at least in my experience, I don't see a lot of wool blends. They probably are out there, but mine are all like 100% wool. This is a classic. The next one here is the Colt 1911, and this is the GI model. And I think that has to be brought up. I know a lot of preppers that love the 1911 platform. Another platform, which is what I would consider a modern classic, because it was introduced in the military in 1985, and that's going to be the Beretta M9. That's definitely a classic. It's a large gun, though. It has a bit of weight to it, but it has a pretty good track record. The next is the IFAC, and they also have like vehicle first aid supplies and vehicle first aid kits. They have the military surgery kits you can get at surplus stores. Just a lot of that kind of stuff floating around. I would be kind of careful, though, on the actual bandages and stuff to make sure that they're not like completely useless if you were to buy them at a military surplus store. The next is the surplus parachute cord. They have trip wires and just a whole medley of wires you can get, like these little packs of wire spools, and even like repair kits, like needle and thread kits. And it's really cool because they have a lot of earth tones, obviously, in the threads. The next would be the military surplus compasses. You can't forget, though, about the web belts. What about handgun holsters, mag pouches, compass pouches, grenade pouches, flare pouches? I mean, they got all kinds of pouches out there, different sizes. And I have lots of different pouches. And sometimes you just don't even know what you're going to do with them, but over time you find purposes for them. Okay, so the next would be some of their flashlights. Now, in the modern day, though, it's hard to kind of want to get into military surplus flashlights because they really pale in comparison to the capabilities that are available now. So unless you're just a collector, I don't know, I'd probably skip the flashlights and even possibly the signal beacons that they used to use. The P38 and the P51 can opener. I mean, I have a whole bunch of those, and they actually work very well. Sometimes I actually use them in the woods. Wool blankets. This goes back to the wool products. I love my GI, US GI issued wool blankets. They are pretty heavy. I'm not going to lie. They have some weight to them, but man, really warm. I also like the poncho tarps. I see a lot of people that are preppers really get into that. If they don't do the poncho tarps, they actually get just a standalone tarp that's military issued. Earplugs or any type of ear protection. They have those very small inside the ear or the inner ear plugs, and they're typically just maybe like anywhere from 50 cents to a couple dollars for those. And they typically come in like either black or olive drab container. It's a very small, like keychain size container with a sliding top, and they have like bright safety orange earplugs in them. And they sometimes either have one set or two sets in there. The next is the bug nets or mosquito nets. Very handy. Military surplus fire starters and tinder. They come in a full wide range, depending on what branch of the military you're in. Weapons cleaning kits. Obviously, it just depends on what weapon system that you're looking for. But definitely for 5.56 and 9mm and things like that are going to be very, fairly easy to find. Camouflage netting. That's something that I'm actually continuing to look more for. In my area, it's harder to find, and it typically is still pretty expensive, even when you find it in a surplus store, unless it's in really bad condition. But yeah, netting is very, very helpful, and I recommend all preppers to have a good amount of that. Whatever the camouflage that would actually work in your area. The next is face paint. I have quite a few canisters of face paint, and I know a lot of more serious preppers. And I'm not saying I'm like a super serious prepper. I'm just saying that people who have been doing this for a while. That's what I probably should say. They kind of just accumulate some of this stuff, and they end up with face paint too. I personally don't really use that. Even when I practice or even have fun out in the woods, I get my ghillie suit on, and I didn't put that on this list, but the ghillie suit to me is probably one of the best and the ultimate camouflage. The next would be the Gerber 06 Auto. This is what I would call another modern classic. I mean, this is relatively new item, so I was hesitant to even put this on the list. It just celebrated its 10-year anniversary, so maybe this shouldn't be on the list, but this is the switchblade that the military issues to a lot of soldiers. Not all, but a lot. The 06 Auto. And so it's okay. I don't really have a lot of interest in that particular blade, but a lot of soldiers swear by it and say that it's actually saved their life. So, hey, it makes the list. The last item, though, and this is really something that I almost forgot about, even though I'm surrounded in some of my rooms in my house with these this particular product, if you will. And it's the ammo cans, the actual, real U.S. military issued and used military cans. For ammo, the different sizes too. They have different calibers, so they had different size ammo cans, but the real steel ones, not the plastic ones. And what I've done, at least the ones that needed it, I sanded them down and I repainted them, put several coats of paint on there. I used olive drab, so it all kind of looked original. And yeah, man, it is. It's something that you have to bring up. You have to say that ammo cans is something that it is a used item, and they're actually in demand, like the real ones. You can see and you find a lot of the so-called military ammo cans, but when you look further into it, a lot of them are like Chinese replicas or that they're plastic, and so you want the real deal with the actual gasket on them and everything. And mine are just wonderful. I mean, a lot of mine, believe it or not, are back from like the Vietnam conflict and maybe just slightly after that. So mine are kind of old, not like real old, but they have a little bit of age to them, but they're very sturdy. Just wanted to share this and see what you think about this list, and if I'm hitting all cylinders here. So yeah, classic military survival gear for preppers that we continue to use. As always, thanks for coming along. You guys take care.